I think as a child, I understood the power of a father's voice. My mother would tell me I could do something, but when my dad told me I could do it, if my dad told me I could run through that wall, I would run through that wall. That's the kind of power a father has in his voice over his children.
This is Dadography, a podcast with stories and insights on fatherhood from dads around the globe, dedicated to providing you with the tools and tips to become a better dad. I'm your host, Corey Wood. Hey, welcome everybody once again to the Dadography podcast. I'm your host, Corey Ward, and on this show, we speak with dads from around the globe in efforts to attain insight, understanding on what we can do to become better dads. And before I introduce today's guest, I just want to reiterate to you guys that I believe wholeheartedly that dads can single-handedly change the world. So be sure to be very mindful of how you're raising your kids and the things that you're teaching. That being said, today's guest is Darren Phillips. I look forward to speaking to you, Darren. Thank you for coming on to the show. It's a real pleasure, man.
I tell you, it's really a pleasure for me. It's truly an honor to be one that you would choose to interview on this podcast. Really do appreciate it.
For sure, man. So let's jump right into it, Darren. Tell me about you. Help me and the audience get a an understanding of who Darren Phillips is.
Well, Darren Phillips was born on the island of Trinidad and Tobago, migrated to United States at the age of 22, went into dental technology school, uh, and finished up. I'm about 30 years now into dental technology. I have a master's in dental technology field where I do from crowns to implants and so forth. Been married over 30 years to my beautiful wife, Valerie. I have three beautiful children, a young woman, I should call them. That's Shekinah, Zoe, and Melody. We pastor a church, been pastoring for over 16 years, Christ United Church in Atlanta, Georgia. And
Okay.
that's just a little bit about me.
Wow. So Shekinah, that represents in the Christian faith the glory of God, and
Yeah.
Zoe is help me out now, the God
The,
kind of
li- the,
life.
li- yes, sir. Yes, sir. You got
Oh man. All right.
it.
So they've got some significant names. My youngest son, who's my second youngest, his name is Legend.
Ah, wow.
when when he was born, we went to Walmart, and it was maybe a day or two later after he was born, we had to go to Walmart to get some Pampers or something to that effect. And the lady said, "Well, what's his name?" And I said, "His name is Legend." And she said, "Oh, that's such a big name for such a small
Mm.
baby." And I said, "Give him some time. He just got here. Give him some time."
That's
So
good.
yeah, man.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think people don't understand the importance of names. Names are very important. I've seen it with my children. The names that I gave them, they have taken on the identity of those names. So you be very careful what you name your child because words have power. Words are seeds. The Bible talks about the world being framed by words. So every time you call that child's name, you are reminding them of who they are called to be. So you have to be very careful what you name your child. I think is very important.
Well, I thank you, man. I got to tell you, Darren, we've gotten a lot of really good tips from dads around the globe, but we have not had that tip yet. So thank you for a fresh wave of information or insight that we ought to give
Yeah.
thought to. And this is obviously, guys, if your children already have names, I mean, you don't have to start running to go change names, right?
Right.
But
Right.
if
Right.
you are a man who your significant other is pregnant, you're an expecting father, let's say,
Right.
then what Darren is encouraging you to do is give some thought to what you name your child. It's got significance, and as he mentioned, you're going to be calling that person that name for the rest of their life. So I appreciate that,
Right.
Darren. That's good stuff, man, for
Yes,
sure.
sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So you're into dental technology, married 30 years, three children. Are they boys or girls?
Well, I had the great pleasure, God, seeing it fit to give me three girls. And most people would say, well, I wonder what type of life you lived before you got married and had children. Why would God give you three girls? But I tell you, I wouldn't have choose to have it any other way. They are
Mm.
awesome young ladies, great purpose. They understand their purpose and their destiny, and they're doing great things, man. They're doing great things, and I thank God for
Well,
them.
what are their ages?
Shekinah is 29, Zoe is 25, and Melody is 22.
This is exciting, Darren, because I get the feeling, obviously, they're still young women, but I get the
Yes.
feeling that we'll have an opportunity to get a lot of hindsight from you.
Hmm.
And that's important because you know the saying, man, right? Like 2020. Hindsight
Yes,
is
sir.
2020. Well, listen, man, before we, get into you being a father, why don't you take me back? Tell me about your dad. What was he like? What was that experience like with your dad?
Well, I'm glad that you asked that because I believe that it's important to understand your father. Um, my father, he was very charismatic. He's the guy that if there were 10 guys on the block, he would come and seven would leave with him. He had that kind of influence. He was a man that had great influence. He was a man that was loved. Sadly, he was loved more on the outside than he was loved on the inside
Mm,
because the people that he mentored, they saw one side of him, but we had an opportunity to see the whole man. And seeing the whole man, there were attributes and characteristics that were not helpful for me as a young man. There was a lot of aspects of who a father should be that were missing. And I'm not knocking my dad because you can only give from what you have to give. So when I look at his life, he was the result of his father's life. So I'll go back to my grandfather, and I had to, as I am now, I'm able to look back and see where they didn't have good mentors or good fathers. And again, like I said, you could only give from what you have. You can't give what you don't have. So I understand that. And, my father helped me. There were good things about him. He was a great protector. One things that I taught men, and I've come to understand that there's five elements or great dynamics of a man, and those dynamics is that he's a protector, he's a provider, but he's also a priest, a prophet, and a pastor. And my father he was a great protector, and in some ways a good provider. The other aspects he didn't know, and because he wasn't um, taught certain things, he couldn't teach me. So,
So let me dig into this just a little bit, right?
uh-huh,
So he needs to be a protector, um,
uh-huh,
and obviously that is likened him to walking down the street. You have to protect your family against some unforeseen danger. He
right,
needs to be a provider,
mm-hmm,
and you know I know that current day the world may push people towards got to be a millionaire or whatever the case, but
right,
no,
right,
you need to put a roof over
right, right,
your child's head, put clothes on their
right,
back, put food in their
right,
stomach, and hence
right,
you are a provider, right?
right,
And then so
mm-hmm,
you said he needs to be a priest,
right,
a prophet, and a
uh-huh,
provider. Now,
and a
our
pastor,
show, yeah, a pastor, excuse me, a pastor. Our show is definitely pro father. We want to understand all of the dynamics that a dad should bring to the table, the proverbial
right,
table, right? So when you
right,
say a priest, a prophet and a pastor, and I was trying to figure it out in my head. I was like, okay, well, a prophet would mean, that might be a synonym with anticipating and foreseeing, okay, well,
Right.
this is probably the best move to help me with the priest and the pastor. And I say that because not a
Mhm.
lot of our listeners, or I don't know how many, but not all of our listeners are Christian like yourself, and
Right.
so
Right.
it's they hear a foreign language. So help me to understand. Help me to understand that.
Totally understand that. When I begin to look at fathers around me and begin to understand what true fatherhood is, I could only go to the true father, and who is the father of all fathers. And from learning from his textbook, his blueprint for us, I understood that I had to be a priest. What is a priest? A priest is pretty much one that is in connection with the Father God, and he prays for his child. He protects his child spiritually. A priest is one who goes into God and comes out with information from God.
Okay.
So, so in regards to being a priest, that was my job, praying and covering my children and hearing from God who they're called to be. Pastor speaks of just one who teaches, who trains, who develops.
Okay. Okay.
And a prophet is one who I believe that every person has a purpose.
Hmm.
And I believe it's your job as a father to understand what is the purpose of that child that God has given you. And as you understand, that's where the prophet comes in, where you're able to hear from God or
Hmm.
see who your child is and direct them in the path that they are called to be. Because
Right.
I have three girls and they all have different giftings and different calls and different destinies. So
Okay.
uh, that's where that came in. That's where that comes in.
I understand. I understand. And thank you. Now, I do have a question as it relates to your dad. You said he was a protector and a provider, which means that perhaps on the other three, he wasn't quite where that would have been most beneficial for you. But in
Right.
general, overall, would you say the impact on him being a protector and a provider positive or negative? Or what impact do you think it had on you as a young man and then growing into a man?
I must say that, of course, there were positives, but there were also negatives. The positive aspects of that is that I know that in regards to protection, I know no one could touch me because I know that he would protect me with his life. I knew that, right? Um, Negative, wasn't a good encourager. He didn't have that aspect, didn't know how to encourage.
Do you think that would have been more from the priest or more from the prophet or more from the pastor?
I I would think that would
The
be more
encouragement.
from, right. That encouragement would be coming from a pastor standpoint.
Okay. Okay.
And I don't if there's anything else that I want to help fathers with is to be an encourager. You
Mm,
have to be an encourager to your children. I believe that one of the ways that we father, I use the acronym STEP,
okay.
STEP.
Hmm.
S is for support. You must be a supporter of your child. Support them financially, educationally. You must be that support. You become that foundation so that they can stand. You're that step. You're that
Hmm.
step so that they could go up. I believe every father wants his child to excel here. And that's how they step up. They step up by you supporting them. They step up by you training them to think, training them to tell them that it's okay to fail, teaching them when they fail how to win. You know, E is for encouragement. You have to be your child's greatest encourager. Nobody should encourage your child more than you do, right? And the power of encouragement, and we see the lack of it today. And my dad was good in that in certain points, whereby I think as a child I understood the power of a father's voice. My mother would tell me I could do something, but when my dad told me I could do it, if my dad told me I could run through that wall, I would run through that wall. That's the kind of power our Father has in His voice. over his children. That's why encouraging your child is so important as a father. That's a God given talent or gift that comes from God when it comes onto your children as a father. A father has that kind of influence over his child. And P, come back to being a protector. And when I think of protection, it's not only physically, you have to protect your children financially. You have to protect them in so many different levels. So I believe that one of the criteria for me for being a good father is the word step, and using those words to help propel my children to be greater than me. I'm just a step to get them to
Right.
where they're called to be. Yeah.
That's a great acronym, STEP, definitely. If you had to describe your fatherhood style, taking into account, your experience with your dad, what would you say is your fatherhood style? How do you do it?
Well, I must say that I think I have changed over the years.
Okay.
Because yeah, my style I believe continues, and I pray that it's improving. Because as you grow with your children, you realize that they are growing as well. So the fatherhood style that I had when my children were babies and toddlers had to change as they grew. So my style of fatherhood is changing. Now I have women that I am fathering, so I have to change to meet the need of where they are at that particular time in their life. You understand what I'm saying? So my father's style, I must say, has changed. I think one of the areas that I had to improve in is learning how to listen, being a better listener. I think that has helped me to become a better father, because sometimes you, in your culture and certain things that you were taught, you tend to bring that to the table because that's all you know. But by listening to your children as they speak, it opens you up to meet them where they are at, because they're all different and they have different needs. Sometimes they want daddy to just be a listener. Sometimes they want daddy to be a counselor. Sometimes they want daddy to be a friend. Sometimes they want daddy not to say nothing. I just need your presence. So I think for me, over the years, the style of fathering had to change to meet the needs of my children.
Okay. So we have and this is another first. We have a fatherhood style that is evolving
Right.
as your children evolve,
Yes.
maturing as your children mature.
Yeah.
I can appreciate that for sure, man. That's definitely going into my Rolodex of dad tips for sure. No two ways about it. So, did your initial thoughts or strategy change when you found out you were having your first girl? Like, and I'm asking because, and it may be a stereotype, right? It may be a stereotype,
Right.
like,
Right.
because
Right.
not all men necessarily want to have their first boy, right? But
Right.
assuming that that was the case, did your strategy change?
um, I would have to say honestly, the truth is, the fatherhood style that I had when my daughter was born, or getting married and going into, all I had was the information around me, to develop a style to cater to that child. But again, as time went by, I realized that that my style had to change and to accommodate this gift. Uh, were we looking for a boy? Of course. You know how that goes. You want a junior, you want that, you know what I'm saying? And here comes a beautiful, bouncing baby girl, with purpose and a great destiny. And, you just had to come be a father to that gift that God gave you, and seek God and try and read books to try and be the best father that you could be for that gift that God has given you. When the other two came, I had to up the ante. I actually taught the last one. Melody was going to be the boy, and I had the name, everything, and I'm like, yeah, this is the boy. And then I got a girl. I'm like, wow. And I saw her. I fell in love with her, and that desire, uh, for a son, you know, it was. I didn't say it vanished because I have sons today who I didn't have to feed, which is good. I have spiritual sons, but yeah, again, yeah, that style has to evolve as time goes by with the different children that God has blessed me with.
Corey here, wanting to give you a personal invitation to follow us on Instagram. You can find us at Dadography Podcast. It's really good because you get an opportunity to put a face with the voice that gave you some insight or some encouragement on your journey in fatherhood. We look forward to having you follow us on Instagram at Dadography Podcast. Right. Well, your girls are not really so far apart in age.
Right.
How
hmm
did you deal with sibling rivalries?
Sibling rivalry. Well,
Hmm.
one of the things that I did with them, I told them that they had to love each other, and that love was unconditional. One of the things I would do is when they have fights, I would discipline them and tell them to go hug each other in the corner until I tell them to stop. So they would be mad at each other, hugging each other, and crying together in a corner.
Wow.
And it was funny, but at that time it was funny. I think about it's funny today. But what it taught them is that that's your blood. I would tell them the same blood that flows through her veins flows through your veins. You're a Phillips, and you have to take care of each other. Despite your disagreements, you have to love each other. So you might come to my house one time and see my two daughters in a corner hugging up and crying together, and you be like, "What's going on?" Yeah, they had a fight, and that's how we deal with sibling rivalry in my house.
And how are they now? Obviously they're adults. How are their relationships with one another now?
Inseparable. They're
Mm,
inseparable.
some good results
They,
there.
oh yeah, they would fight for each other. They take care of each other. They have know each other's secrets. They take care of each other, and that began from home. That began in my house. That began from them as kids, helping them to understand that that's your blood. That's your blood.
Right, right.
That's your blood. That's your blood, and you take care of your blood. You take care of each other. You have to teach them that. One things you realize with children, I mean, they're selfish. They come here, they're very selfish. It's about them. It's about me. And you have to teach your children how to love. You have to teach them how to love you. I know that we are caught up in, like, my kid, I gotta give my kid this, I gotta
How do you
love
do
my
that though?
kid.
How do you teach them
Oh,
to love you?
you have to let them know. First of all, you have to let them know that you as a parent, they must honor you. They have to honor you as a parent. You have to let them know now, and this might be kind of off topic, or might kind of wreck some people's world, but
It's all right. It's all good.
I never taught my kids about Santa Claus. I told them Santa Claus is a black man with a bald head, and he feeds you every day. So before you could honor Santa Claus, you go honor your dad and your mom. Let's work it. You understand? So my thing was, I taught them how to honor us for what we're doing for them. You have to teach your children how to love you because they are very selfish. They're selfish. Everything is mine, mine, mine. They come like that, but you have to teach them how to love. For example, when their grandparents, they were little kids and their grandparents would come to visit, I would teach them, go take care of your grandparents. See if they want a cup of tea. Make sure they're comfortable. Make sure they're all right. Look out for your grandma. You have to teach your children how to love and to honor you, because if you don't teach them, and I've seen on so many levels where kids have this, where an entitlement attitude where you owe them something, and that's not good parenting. That's
Right.
not good parenting. That's not going to help them at all.
It sounds like one of the ways you taught them to love was by giving them an example. Would you say that? I mean, obviously, they see the example of you honoring, their grandparents. They see the
Hmm.
example of you loving your wife. Would you say that included in that is loving them so that they can get like OJT, on the job training of what it feels like to be loved and what it
Oh
looks like up
yeah,
close
oh
and
yeah,
personal? Okay.
oh yeah. They understood that. In fact, me getting up early in the morning going to work is an example of love. Not just buying you toys. Yeah, daddy getting up, going to work is because he love you. You understand? I never not hug them and kiss them every opportunity I had. Hug them, kiss them, let them know I love them. From their babies, they know from in the womb, I'm telling them I love them. They know daddy love them. They hear it out of my voice, not just a hug. And that's important, especially for girls. Girls are going to look for their dads. The first man that a girl fall in love with is a father. And that father becomes an example to what kind of man they would desire. Because when I'm raising my girls and I'm developing them, and my job is to develop them in such a way that the man that I put, they have to be, that man has to be able to take them to the next level. And these are things that I've taught them. So that love, they know that I love them with the hugs, the kisses, letting them know how beautiful they are. Affirmation is important. That all that comes from a father. Don't wait for other people to affirm your children and them not hearing your voice as a father, affirming them and loving them.
That's rock solid, man. Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, oh yeah. When you have a father that knows to affirm you and encourage you, man, you could take the mountain, bro. You could
Yeah.
take the
You
mountain.
know, you know something I was thinking about, Darren, may have been last week. I was thinking about how God, right? And I realize that not everybody that listens to the show is under the same spiritual persuasion.
Mm-hmm.
But I think across the board,
Mm-hmm.
God is usually represented as a father.
Yeah.
And that's the result of his doing, right? If God exists, which I believe he
Mm-hmm.
does, then
Mm-hmm.
the fact that he's often compared to a father is a result of his own doing. And what
Yes,
comes
sir.
to mind is that if he has infinite wisdom, if you
Mm-hmm.
just pause right there for a second, right? Like there's no
Mm-hmm.
resource that's unavailable to him. And
Right.
then he determines that he's going to paint a metaphor for us
Mm-hmm.
about the relationship that we're to have with him. He could have
Mm-hmm.
been like, cousins,
Right.
brothers,
Right.
siblings,
Mm-hmm.
mom, you know,
Right.
but father was chosen. And for me, that
Mm-hmm.
carries a certain degree of weight
Oh, yes, it does.
on what we're supposed to be and do
Mm.
for our children. So it's interesting. I mean, again, now listen, guys. I know this isn't a religious show, but we're just conversing, man. We're trying to
Right.
analyze this fatherhood thing so that we
Right.
can become better dads. So don't let your uh perhaps not liking a particular portion of our
Mm-hmm.
conversation make you lose out on the kind of like the Rubik's cube thought process of
Mm-hmm.
becoming a better dad.
I think, and I agree with you. Thank you for sharing that with those who might be a little uncomfortable with what we're saying, and that's never my intention to make anyone uncomfortable. But one of the things that I do know is what does success look like? It doesn't matter where it comes from. If it's successful and it works, you want to get that information, and success to me is more than money. You know, success to me is about succession. And how could you have success without succession? And how could you have succession without having kids who are successful?
You say that, and I'm thinking earlier, you kind of hinted to the fact that your girls are doing well. Give me a little bit about where they are now. I mean, 22, 25, 29. They are not,
Mm.
laying in cribs waiting for you to bring milk. So what's going
No,
on
no.
what's going on at that age, at these ages now?
Well, let me talk about Shekinah first. She's a firstborn. Again, she came here with a lot of talent. Before she could speak, she was singing. She was trying to sing, and she's pretty much her kids come here telling you, "Hey, this is what God gave me. What you going to do with this, Dad? Are you going to help me develop the gift that God put inside of me?" And very intelligent from a young age, and she had opportunities to have recording contracts at a young age and so forth. But as a father, again, that's where you being that pastor, that prophet, you were able to see. And I told her, I said, well, I know you're going to be a singer, but you're going to be a doctor. You're going to be a doctor that sings, And right now, she is at uh, South Carolina University of Medicine getting her PhD in neuroscience. She's going to be a neurologist. She actually just won an award, so to speak, to represent her state, South Carolina, and also Alabama, because she's also affiliated with UAB in University of Alabama Medical School, where they chose um, throughout the country one person to represent a state, and she was chosen to represent two states to speak to the senators of each state in regards to getting funds for their programs. So she's doing pretty well. She's doing pretty well.
Okay. So we got ourselves a home run now.
Uh huh.
Is Zoe's
Zoe.
25. What's
Zoe's
going on there?
25. Zoe graduated with she graduated with 2 degrees, one in media and also psychology.
Oh
And
wow.
yeah. So she right now is working at Warner Media. She's an assistant to one of the directors there, working in Warner Media Productions.
Oh,
Uh,
that's one of the largest
yeah,
production companies in the US.
she's working with them, and her goal is to mix media and psychology to try and help people. So that's her goal right now. She's doing pretty well.
It sounds like she may be an inventor as well, man.
Yeah.
That'll be new to, new to the territory.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes,
Well,
sir. So
that's
she's
awesome.
doing pretty well. Doing pretty well.
And so that's
And
two home runs, man. Come on now. I'm
yeah,
cheering
yeah.
for you. What do we got?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And Melody, graduated from Magna Scott with a degree in I must say leadership and also political science. And she's now attending Howard University Law School at Howard University on her first year. She's doing pretty well. Just got an internship with a company out in San Francisco, and she's doing pretty well.
You
Doing
said
pretty well.
Howard University. That's a HSBC, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So
Yes,
for
sir.
our listeners listening around the world, HSBC is a historically black college. And
Right.
so in the African American community, it does hold some weight to
Yes.
have attended an HSBC. So my question though is, you mentioned she's now studying law. She's already
Uh,
done some political stuff. And
uh,
so let me just kind of conclude, you've hit three home runs. Now, I know where you stand spiritually. I think from early on in our
hmm.
conversation, I got a sense of you. Even after you said that you're a pastor, but
Right.
so I know that things like prayer, and the coming together of people with common minds, as
Hmm.
you all. Then the question becomes, what were some of the practical aspects of your fathering to help you hit three home runs? I mean, a doctor,
Hmm.
a lawyer. I mean, come on, a media mogul.
well, well, I must say it comes from my background of educators. My mom was a teacher in Trinidad and Tobago. My grandfather was the number one pharmacist in Trinidad and Tobago, and he was very high in education. So we were taught the importance of education. I think that people don't understand how powerful education is when it comes to destroying poverty in our family's life. Education was key in my house. You had to do your best. And, I know you have different people listening, but I know for us, and I know for me in the African American community, I've always told my daughters that a B is not enough. A B is not enough for who you are. You have to give me an A. One thing that I told them from young, I said, nobody has a greater mind than you. I told them the importance of the two E's, the E of entertainment and education. It's okay to be entertained, but you have to spend more time being educated. I
Do
told
you
them that
think?
you,
Do you think? And excuse me for interrupting. Do you think this entertainment to education ratio is extremely important now, even more so than before? With so much access to, I'm thinking about kids that are doing homeschool now, that are doing.
right? Oh wow,
So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, I mean, with home doing homeschool now, you really have to find that balance, you know. But my thing is, you have to know the destination of your children and what they're called to be. And if I see greatness in you, my job is to get you there. And that speaks of, yes, you're going to have a time to be entertained, but I'm going to push you to become who God called you to be.
I
Um,
would argue. Excuse me
mhm,
again. I would
mhm,
argue that every dad sees greatness in his child.
right.
And so, with that being said,
Hmm.
every dad should be pushing towards
Yes.
building the greatness. And maybe sometimes dads see the greatness in their children, but for whatever reason or the other, they will maybe cling on to what's not so great about their child and constantly attack that as
Yeah.
opposed to doing
Ooh,
what you mentioned
that's heavy.
earlier
That is
and
heavy.
encouraging,
Wow.
making encouraging a
Yeah.
very important part of the toolbox.
Right. Right.
It's something for
That
us to
is
think
that is
about,
a
man.
that is awesome. That's awesome because just as I said, see the greatness in every child. There is greatness.
Mhm.
Every child has greatness. Every child. Some might be educationally, some just know how to do, they have that knack. And then there's some that are skilled in music or skilled in dance or skilled in different giftings. And, so every child has greatness within them. And as a father, like I said, I can't focus so much on the negatives, but I have to be an encourager. I have to be an encourager. I have to be that person. And that's such a great point that you make. And I pray that fathers grasp that because I think it helps to determine how far your children will go.
Well, I'll tell you what, man. Normally, this is the part of the show where I would ask you to speak to your girls 30 years from now. Considering this episode is going to be on the internet, it's, for all intents and purposes, is a time capsule. But I want to change lanes a little bit today. The largest stadium in the world is Narendra Modi Stadium, and it's in a place called Ahmedabad, India, Gujarat, and it has a capacity of 132,000 people.
Mm,
That being said, this stadium, which is the internet and this podcast, has that capacity. We don't have that many followers yet, but I'm sure we'll get there. Guys, be sure to subscribe on all the major platforms: Spotify, Stitcher, Amazon, YouTube, and follow along and join us in our journey of becoming a better dad. But Darren, if you had the capacity of this stadium in Gujarat, India, right now,
mm,
and not only that, but this is going to be in a time capsule. And so fathers who are perhaps babies right now are going to have an opportunity, if they've, stumbled up on this podcast one way or another, to get some insight, some advice. So what I would like for you to do, as opposed to speak to your your daughters 20 years from now. I would like you to speak to fathers 20 years from now, and whatever you would give them in terms of being a better dad.
Wow. There's so much that I could say, but what I would say is find men who are doing what you would like to do. In order to be successful, you need to find success. Somebody's already doing it. Find good mentors to help you to be a good father and love your children unconditionally. Love them unconditionally. Teach them how to think. Do not try to fix all their problems. Teach them how to think. They have the capacity within them to solve problems. Be a good listener. Sometimes listen more than you speak, because in listening, you would get the answer that they need, not what you desire for them, but what is right for them to be who they are called to be. Be their greatest encourager, encourage them, be their greatest supporter. And again, I seal it with love them unconditionally. Don't lose them because you don't understand them or because they might not have done what you desire for them to do. You have influence over their lives. Your voice have influence, and you have to maintain that influence. One of the ways you maintain that influence is by being that supporter for them, being consistent, being a consistent father, unchangeable, being there for them when they need you. The rough time, the hard times, the good times, just be there for them. Let them know that they're important. Invest more in them than you do in other people and maybe even in other things. Invest your time, invest your money, invest your mind into them. And I guarantee you they would never lose because God has given you that power as a father to speak into their lives. Help them find their identity and give them purpose.
Find their identity and give them purpose. Darren, thank you so much for your words of wisdom. I'm sure that fathers literally from all around the globe will be able to take this tool or these tools and put them in their toolbox of fatherhood. Guys, thank you for tuning in once again to another episode of the Dadography podcast. Mr. Darren Phillips, thank you so much for coming on and sharing with us, uh, your experience, your journey as a dad, and thank you for speaking to dads now and in the future and encouraging them. One of the things that was just so reoccurring there, gentlemen, love your children. And I'll give you a final thought. Love is absolutely invincible. Y'all have a good one.
Step, but this time in the name of fatherhood. Support, train, encourage, and protect. Be part of the foundation they can stand on and excel even further than you have. Words have power, and so do names. While most of our listeners are already fathers and renaming their child is out of the picture, it may not be too late to reconsider whatever nickname you gave your child. That may be affecting them in a negative way. Evolve as a father. Your kids are evolving as time passes, so whatever your style was yesterday might be obsolete today. Upgrade yourself and your fatherhood style whenever possible. Love them unconditionally, but also very importantly, be an example of love for them. Listen, man. No, really, listen. Listen to them. Thank you for listening, guys. Darren, thank you for taking time out and having a conversation with us.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Dadography podcast. Thanks very much for listening. I would, however, like to invite you to be a part of the show. Visit our website at dadography.net. Scroll down to the bottom of the page, click on the microphone. Tell us your name, where you're from, and what fatherhood means to you. Remember, it takes more than DNA to be a dad.